All right, welcome back to Switch to Linux. We have a fun show today. We're going to be talking about the current state of the literature of COVID-19. And just for extra fun, I decided to bring a doctor on board with us. So Brian joined us, practicing physician down in Florida. How's it going, Brian?
Okay, how you doing, Tom? I'm doing
Oh,
good.
not too bad, not too bad. So let's go ahead and start with our fun obligatory stuff that says,
Ooh,
despite, I mean, he's a practicing physician. I have a PhD in molecular toxicology, so we're not exactly ignorant or just internet conspiracy theorists here, but we're also not your physician. So blah, 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 talk to your own physician, things like that, right? So
right.
got to get all that out of the way. But there's so much media hype. In fact, I went out to a friend of mine works in food service, which is kind of a frightening place to be right now. But he's like, I watched a little bit of what the media said, and I'm freaked out now. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem, and they're trying to produce ratings. They're trying to make things a lot, really crazy. And we didn't get a chance to discuss this off camera yet before we got started. So, Brian, is the America going crazy, or is it justified concern? Where do you sit in the middle of all that?
Um, I think for the most part, America is going kind of crazy. They're thinking the concept is sort of in the right direction, but they're just going so far
Mm-hmm.
overboard with it. It's like they want to build a one-story building and they're building a 500-story building. It's
Yeah.
just everything, the principles are there, but it's hyper exaggerated,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah. So, do you think the health crisis of this is absolutely horrible, or is it a little overblown, or is it, hey, we have to listen and isolate ourselves, or else we all die? What do you think on that?
Well, that's an interesting question because being that the government is telling us to isolate ourselves, if we don't comply with the government's wishes, we risk incurring the wrath of the government, which might be worse than the wrath of the virus. So I personally would self quarantine if the government told me to, just to
Hmm.
prevent any collateral
Yeah.
health issues caused by the government.
Yeah, yeah. So, and if you've been following my channel for a while, I have not been freaking about it. I've actually been poking more fun at it than anything. I am pleased to report I did have to walk through Walmart again today. I think I've been to the store for the last 5 or 6 days in a row, and I'm done
Mm-hmm.
because I had to get a new card reader. My card reader died. So I got a new card reader that's, I'm sure, false advertising. 72 in one card reader. I don't think there's 72 cards out there. But anyway, since I was already in the store, I meandered through, and I am pleased to report that there was toilet paper on the shelf. It was only 3 packs of that hard, rough, scratchy Scott stuff that I don't want to use. But anyway, they did have a little bit. There were a few bags of flour now. There was a couple loaves of bread. But that's, I mean, it's still a little crazy. People are still buying stuff out. But I think it's too overblown still. That's my thought. But at the same token, yeah, there is some things we possibly should do differently for a period of time, but I don't think, as some people have said, this is going to be going on until August. I don't see that happening for a variety of reasons that we'll kind of get into here today, because we're actually going to dig into the scientific literature, see what they're saying, see the recommendations. Of course, touch your face less. This is my AOC impression. Okay, and if you guys
And
saw that, it's
I'm sitting here like this.
yeah, touch your face less, people. All right. Do you want to have anything else to add before we jump into the reviews, and we'll look at the comments here as well?
Well, we could do the reviews in the comments. Like I said, the idea is good, but if you compare this with the flu, and a lot of people get mad if you say it's the flu, and I understand because it's not, even though it
Hmm.
sort of is. But you
Hmm.
know, I it depends who you talk to, and I don't
Yeah.
want to argue, so I'll go either way for now. But it's close enough to the flu. They're both respiratory, lower respiratory, more specifically. With the dry cough, with the fever,
Hmm.
the way they're spread. So the contagiousness, the COVID's a lot more contagious, but it's still a variant of the flu.
Hmm.
So a lot of the flu, like, oh, I should, in order to be more correct, Not instead of a variant of the flu, it is similar to the flu, the
Now,
way it affects the body. The
now
mode of
that's
operation is
symptomatically though, because I
symptomatically is
think they're
correct.
completely different families of viruses, if I remember. And I did not look up again what family of viruses the flu belongs to. Do you know off the top of your head or
Right.
not?
I think influenza is its own
Yeah.
group, if I'm not
Which if
mistaken.
is that are those DNA or those are probably DNA viruses though, right?
DNA,
Not
DNA.
RNA. And that's the difference is that the this virus is an RNA virus. And
Right.
so they're in a completely different class of families, but they have similar symptoms is what the
Now,
challenge is.
right. Now,
So
SARS and MERS were also corona type
yeah.
viruses.
So
So
this
this
is
isn't the first corona.
yeah, this actually is a SARS virus. It's actually SARS-CoV-2. SARS, the big outbreak that was a huge deal, was SARS-CoV-1 or just SARS-CoV. This is SARS-CoV-2. So it is a SARS virus. It is a MERS virus. And so it seems, though, to be, as far as SARS and MERS viruses go, very benign because those were big deals. If we had
Right.
a pandemic of that virus like we have with the current coronavirus, we'd all be screwed. We'd be seeing mass population decline. We don't have that because for the average person, this basically is a common cold. Out of the risk of sounding like, oh, he's not taking it seriously enough. No, I am. I've actually spent the last couple days digging through the scientific literature to understand what I'm talking about because I have a background in this. So
Hmm.
now, technically, I had more of a background in xenobiotics rather than in viruses, but it does turn out that this virus, the mechanism, is actually a toxicological mechanism, which is very interesting. So we'll kind of get into that. I want to see what people are saying, though, and say hello to everybody first. So Rue M2 says, smiley, and Nathan says, neat. Greetings, Joseph. How's it going there? Keith Richardson, greetings. Can't take ibuprofen. This is one we were talking about. There is nothing in the scientific literature about ibuprofen except for one article looking at the metabolic pathway. And I would guess just by looking at that, ibuprofen seems to be okay, but I don't know for sure. There's a lot of apparent misinformation and confusion about ibuprofen. So definitely listen to your doctor, whatever your doctor says, listen to that. There's a lot of misinformation about ibuprofen. And we'll look at that one article, I think, if we get the chance. Repurposed drugs being used in experimental trials. Lopinavir, isn't that the HIV drug? Is that or is that the hypertension drug?
No, that's a HIV.
HIV.
Which
Okay. Yeah, and that spawned a conspiracy theory that this is a hyper HIV bioengineered. I'm going to debunk all that. We'll get into all that. Chloroquine, that's just a general antiviral, right?
hmm
And S protein specifically targets this compound, but I don't know how it functions in the medically. Do you know how the S protein drugs would function?
not specifically.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can parse that out. Pizza's on. Pizza. Pizza is still alive. Last I heard, I talked to Pizza today. He is surviving out there in the corona. Well, they were dethroned. Seattle was dethroned by New York. New York's no. We are the biggest. We are the best. We will beat this thing. And their idea of beating this thing is getting the most cases, apparently. So, oh, sorry to you guys up there in New York. How's it down there in Florida, where you're at? Do you have cases in your town?
Not in my town. We have them close to my town.
Mm.
I'm in Flagler County. The last time I checked, Flagler County is one of the few counties that doesn't have any
All right.
yet.
Sweet.
But Volusia County, immediately south of us, where I both teach at the college there and I treat a lot of patients there. I think they have 5 or 6 cases there.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
they've had 2 or 3 deaths.
Mhm.
Orange County, there's a lot of cases. Right now, the big one is Miami-Dade.
Yeah. Now,
Miami-Dade is undergoing a big
as
problem.
you're treating patients right now, what different precautions are you taking now that you had not taken in the past?
Well, let's see. I've been wearing gloves ever since the HIV days of the 1980s, so I didn't have to worry about that. gathering up and suiting up. I mean, for the kind of work I do, unless I'm dealing with a specifically ill patient, standard, gear's good enough. The only thing I would sometimes do now is if the patient is showing any kind of symptoms, I would wear what they call an N95 standard mask.
Mm-hmm.
And because if it's not that grade, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, which we'll probably go into later, surgical masks are not adequate to protect the wearer from the outside world. They're only good at protecting the outside world from the wearer, and only then if they're put on correctly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that are panic buying because of the hype and everything, they're buying surgical masks and then they're putting them on wrong with their mouth covered, but their nose is sticking out.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that doesn't do any good at all.
Yeah.
So then me as a doctor, I need to buy a mask. I log on to my medical supplier, look for masks. They're temporarily unavailable.
They're out because people have been going through and buying them all up and hoarding them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting.
But that would be the only thing.
Yep.
That would be the only thing really that I do differently now.
Yeah, just wearing the masks now.
Wearing the mask.
Yeah. Okay. So Keith Richardson, the big thing is services in the air. Now, this is one I want to hit on because was it de Blasio, the mayor of New York, I think, did a conversation saying that the virus will die after only a few minutes on a surface counter. That is not correct. Like 3 or 4 hours, yes. A few minutes, no. He said specifically in his speech, I believe, a few minutes. If he said that, that is incorrect information. But if it's on a surface, after a couple of hours, it will be dead. You will not have to worry about it. So that means that if you're going in and eating in a restaurant somewhere, if you are going to need to eat in a restaurant, not a restroom, a restaurant, whoops, it would be wise to disinfect the countertops. So if you're carrying Clorox wipes, wipe down the tables before and after you eat, would be the best thing to do. But if you're going out, like I went out and I write out of the house, and so I'll usually go to the parks. I'm not all that concerned. There's not enough people hanging out at the parks in my town that nobody had sat at that thing until at least the day before at the shortest period of time. And so I'm pretty confident I'm okay. So just be aware of that. But through the air is the biggest vector. Someone coughing, someone sneezes. You have is it a 6 foot or a 10-foot radius? Do you remember? I can't remember.
6.
I think it's 6. So if somebody's coughing, sneezing, all that kind of stuff, give them 6 feet of space. If you definitely want to have the best way to get through the grocery store, just go in there all over, just hack away. People will part like the Red Sea as you get in. But we don't want to go too far that way because we definitely do want to have a no hype review. We don't want to, I don't want to cause panic, but I also don't want to cause complacency. Let's see. So Benedetto says, buy soap, not toilet paper. Corona spreads through your hands, not your bungholio. This is true. Let's see. Affect senior citizens more frequently. Yes. Mm-hmm. That is definitely the concern. Hello, Carbon Programmer. Greetings. Former biology teacher started wearing a gas mask at school when the first cases arrived in the city. Gas mask. Is that N95 or better? I guess
that's a little bit better.
That one's okay. Hey, there you go.
Just a tad.
So pizza, get yourself a gas mask. Full hazmat suit, pizza. Just get a whole fast hazmat suit. So can I leave the house if I get a full hazmat suit? Coronavirus is worse than SARS because it tons a lot faster. No, it's not. It's not that bad. It spreads a lot farther, but it has a infinitely lower mortality. And that's really the difference. SARS, if you got SARS, it was a medical crisis. What is it, 10% death rate somewhere around SARS? Massive. This virus here is only like it's really small. It really is small. It has killed people, but almost all of them have been either elderly or immunocompromised, or other pre-existing heart or lung conditions is the biggest concern that we've seen so far.
Yeah, a lot of the deaths have been in nursing homes.
Yeah.
On medically compromised patients.
Yep. And Let's see. I wrote down a couple general notes before we dive into that. 12,000 died from the swine flu. Yep. Let's see. Those masks are hilarious. No offense, people think that those huge holes block viruses. Yeah. So it's like you said, though. It's good if you have it. You should be wearing a mask. But if you're wearing the mask, it's not actually going to help you. If you don't have it. Let's see.
And you have to wear it properly. Some masks have to actually be fitted to your face.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't fit them properly, there's gaps on the side that air goes through unfiltered, and that defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Is the SARS death rate comparable to Ebola? I don't remember much about the Ebola. Can you comment on Ebola?
The mortality rate for Ebola, believe it or not, that was one of the worst. 90%.
Ouch.
Was the mortality. Pretty much with Ebola, if you got it, you were dead.
Yeah,
I mean, very few people survived. But it wasn't nearly as communicable as this is, thank God.
Correct. That's kind of the trade-off we have. This is a lot more communicable, but it's not going to kill the average person. But if you do have exposure to it, definitely avoid your older relatives or things. Other factors, if you're a smoker, and yes, all you guys have been trying to legalize pot, yes, marijuana as well. If you are a smoker, you have a greater increase of mortality. Because of the way it works, and we'll get into that. So a couple other notes that I had here just from some general things. We may or may not get into these, so I'll just kind of read these guys off. Younger people, of course, have a greater immunity, mostly because of the greater amount of receptors that help mediate the situation. We'll kind of get into all of that. The total longest that we know of from infection to totally clearing it when you're completely clear has been 37 days. I was not able to find an average. Although the average illness starts in 3, I think 5.2 is the actual average, with a range of 3 to 7 days before you're exposed, before you get it on average. Although it could be up to like 20. Two ideas. Some people will say herd immunity will fix it, which I think is probably a really good bet. The problem is herd immunity, this is what UK is doing, also leads to a lot more health crisis. So we probably don't want to try a herd immunity like UK is doing. Sorry, you guys over there in the UK. Your government's lost their ever-loving mind. Just because we want to allow a herd immunity to occur naturally. So basically what they're trying to do is, back when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid, if somebody got chicken pox, all of the kids went to their house to play.
Pox parties, they used to call them.
Yeah. And so the reason why is because of when you'd get it, you'd not get it. The problem is our immune systems are so compromised. When you get chicken pox, it's a syphilis virus. It lives inside of your body and it never goes away. If you have an immunocompromised situation, this is why we're getting people breaking out with shingles, which is very unusual. That used to never happen, but because we're so immunocompromised, that tends to occur. All right. I'll open the floor back up to you for anything else on this, and then I have some articles to look at. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and look at articles here. Where's my article view? There's my article view. Okay, so I wanted to pull up some articles. So all of these are from the peer-reviewed scientific literature. So we're not going to go with, we're not going to go into like conspiracy theories, except should we debunk the HIV conspiracy theory first? Is that what we should do? Want to comment on that one?
Which one?
Have you heard the conspiracy theory that it's all engineered with HIV and stuff to kill people more?
Yeah, which is absolute nonsense.
Yeah. All
because it's crap.
So here from Emerging Microbes and Infections, Journal of Emerging Microbes and Infections. I don't have the exact. Oh, here it is. So it's accepted February 4th. So it's February 4th of this year. So basically, what they're saying is, okay, people have been throwing out this conspiracy theory that it's HIV. So let's go ahead and do this. So in the terms of biochemical tests, the way you do this is you take the virus and you chop it into pieces using what are called restriction enzymes. So you take the DNA things and you break it into the individual pieces, and then you just throw it all together into a system that will recombine everything, and it will latch onto the pieces that are similar to it. So this is a way of testing, does this come from that? This is how you do that. So what they did, of course, is they pulled in the original virus, they pulled in HIV, they went through the whole database, they went through viral databases, and what they found is zero consistency across the board with HIV. So no, there is no relationship between HIV and this. Where I think that conspiracy theory came from is that HIV drugs will help to prevent the infection of this disease because, duh, it's an RNA virus. They're both RNA viruses. That's what happens.
Exactly.
So that's all we want to say about the HIV connection. That is completely false. All right, let's get into the epidemiology and the pathogenesis of COVID. This one article, I think this one was a February article. I do have a newer one, but this one had a couple nicer, easier to read graphs and things. So systemic disorders, excuse me. So we have a fever, cough, fatigue, sputum production, and headache. All right, how to do that. All right. Hemoptysis, acute cardiac injury, hemoxemia, dyspeptemia, lymphedema, and diarrhea. There is something to this toilet paper for it craze. Respiratory disorders, rhinorrhea, sneezing, sore throat, pneumonia, ground glass opacities, RNA anemia, acute respiratory distress, and syndromes. So these are kind of the effects. Now, have you treated anybody with this virus yet?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What were the symptoms, if you can comment on that? Were they just consistent?
Yeah, basically the only one patient I had, they were in a assisted living, and they had like the cough, fever, some chills, but they were breathing actually okay. They were on oxygen, but they were doing okay. It was I believe a 68-year-old male.
And were they
he had
on oxygen before the virus, or did it put on oxygen? Okay.
No.
So put on oxygen. Okay.
No. But they were expecting him to make a full recovery.
Okay.
You know, when I consulted with his other doctors, but he was going to be there at least for 2 weeks.
Okay. So my neighbor, I just saw an oxygen supply company at my neighbor's house, and she's getting old. I'm wondering, should I stay away for 30 days or so?
Might be a good idea, because with this, you need oxygen until you get better, and then you don't need it anymore. So
yeah. All right. I've only seen it over there once, but anyway. They have basically, they're looking at the individual cases. So the first figure here is just showing you how rapidly this thing grew. So this is definitely pandemic level stuff. Talk about the transmission based on the number of infected people that are exposed to a wet animal market in Wuhan City, where live animals routinely sold, suggested a likely zoonotic origin of the COVID-19. That's an important thing to say. So in the genetic mapping, this thing is, was it 90? I think it's 96.3 to 97.4% related to the bat coronavirus. And there's multiple infection routes, which means if somebody ate a raw bat, yes, that could have been the origin. It's not completely for sure, but that is a very good hypothesis as to the origin. So cook your bats, people. Cook your bats. So genomic sequence showed, this says 88% identity with 2 bat related. Again, this is an older article. The newer ones up to that percentage. Some reports have suggested person-to-person transmission is likely route for spreading it. This is supposed by cases that occurred within families and among people who did not visit the market. Person-to-person transmission occurs primarily via direct contact or through droplets spread by coughing or sneezing from an infected individual. Small study conducted on women in their 3rd trimester who were confirmed to be infected with the coronavirus. There is no evidence of the transmission from mother to child, so it does not pass through the placental barrier. However, all pregnant mothers underwent cesarean section, so it remains unclear whether transmission can occur during a vaginal birth or not. So we don't know about that. We'll get into the binding receptor a little bit better because there's some excellent figures in the next one. Anything we want to mention out on this article before we jump on to the next one? The next one is kind of better. Anything else on that? I might need to give you a second to get caught up. I should have sent you this list of articles.
Okay.
Right. So let's go ahead and look at the next one here. All right. So this is the origin, transmission, and the clinical therapies on the coronavirus. So this is a literature review that was released. I don't think, let's see, the date on this one. This one's, I think it's March 10th, I think. So we're just a couple days old. The date's not listed here. It just gives us the article number. So this is from the Military Medical Research. And this guy here, what they're looking at is the origin. So this is where they're looking at how this was related to the bat. So they're saying a 79.5% to SARS-CoV. Now, remember, SARS-CoV was the SARS virus. So this is 79% related to the SARS. But SARS-CoV is 96.2% identical to the BAT-CoV RATG13. Okay, so in other words, this is a SARS from a bat. 96.2 basically means, yeah, it just had a very small shift as it jumped to humans. Let's see. The bat has been suspected as the natural host, and SARS-CoV-2 might be transmitted from bats via an unknown intermediate hosts to infection in humans. It is clear that the virus could use the angiotensin converting enzyme 2. And this is going to be a very significant part where the toxicology comes into play. And so we have epidemiology. So the epidemic of unknown acute respiratory tract infection broke out from the first Wuhan, China, since December 12 of December 2019, possibly related to a seafood market. Several studies that the bat may be potential reservoir of the SARS-CoV-2. However, no evidence suggesting the origin was from the seafood market. In other words, it came from the bat. We just don't know exactly how. We're not going to read through all of that. Human-to-human transmission, this is important, occurs mainly between family members, including relatives and friends who are intimately contacted with patients or incubated carriers. 31.3% of patients traveled to Wuhan, and 72.3% of patients contacting with people from Wuhan among the patients of non-residents. Transmission between healthcare workers occurred at 3.8%. So you're probably safe, Brian. What do you think?
Well, because of where I am and the fact that I only, the only county I go into that there's any occurrences of it is, like I said, Volusia, and they only have about 5 cases, and all 5 of the cases there are in facility settings. Mm-hmm. So, the staff keeps them pretty much isolated in negative pressure rooms, and you go in there with the suits on and the whole bit. So I think I'm pretty safe. Other than that, with my patient population, a lot of them don't travel much. Mm-hmm. They stay at home most of the time. So I think I'm sort of in a low risk, but again, I got to take precautions.
Yep. All right.
You always got to take precautions.
Now, SARS had 33 to 42% transmission between patients. And I think MERS was pretty high as well. Direct contact with intermediate host animals or consumption of wild animals was suspected to be the main route. However, the source remains elusive. Genomic structure, this is kind of what we've already covered, just kind of looking at what it is. This figure here is useful because it kind of shows us the similarities. I wonder if I could find you this article so you could actually see it prior to waiting for the 15 seconds for the stream lag to go to you.
Yeah.
Let's see. So this is kind of how it works. So we have SARS-like bat CoVs. We have the intermediate hosts. We don't know if it goes through domestic animals or not. We're pretty sure that kitties are clear. Puppies, maybe or maybe not. We don't know. So what it uses is this ACE2 binding pocket. So bat has ACE2 binding, swine, civet, and mouse does not have binding. So the S protein, so we were talking about earlier, the S protein drugs. So what the S protein is on top of this virus, we have it pictured here. There's a string of RNA inside of this lipoprotein boundary, and then we have these pink guys sticking out here are basically binding proteins. So we have N proteins inside, we have ssRNA inside, we have the E proteins, and then we have a characteristic, probably what they're looking for to determine if you have it, is these 16 non-structured proteins, NSP1 through 16. And so when the virus gets in, it just starts dumping these proteins that we have no idea what it's doing. And basically, they don't do anything. They just dump out. So there's some other unknown molecules. So S1 determines the virus host range and cellular tropism by RBD. S2 mediates virus membrane fusion by HR1 and HR2. So there's two ways it can get into the body. That's what we know there. All right, so for the host, the receptor is this ACE receptor. So this is the angiotensin, angiotensin? Let's see if it's listed here.
Renin-angiotensin aldosterone system.
Yes, that is exactly the system. I was looking up the exact name of that particular. I forget what the C is. Actually, I have it over here. Another article here. Angiotensin converting enzyme. I knew it was the easy non-scientific word. Angiotensin converting enzyme. So this is what we have expressed, and we have it expressed on several different cells. Where it plays the most prominent use here is on the lower lung tissue. So what this does is, in a toxicological viewpoint, is it comes in and it binds. And what it does is it is a non-reversible binding. So in toxicology, that means it knocks out the receptor. It goes in, finds the receptor, binds, and it never lets go. So it binds this receptor to pull itself in and utilize the host machinery to spit out its protein. So it co-opts the cell based on the presence of this receptor. Okay, so the challenge is the elderly, we start to see a drop of this enzyme. And when this enzyme drops out, it becomes completely non-functional. And this, do you know much about this pathway? Can you comment on what the pathway does off the top?
Well, it controls blood pressure. It controls cardiovascular status. It has a lot to do with mediating the amount of water in the body. It affects kidney function, because renin and angiotensin also have to do with how the glomerular filter, the blood. So it has to do with urinary output. It's a complicated thing that intersects with a couple of different body systems.
Yeah. Okay. So think of all those body systems and then think if they cannot function anymore. That's what this virus does. If you're older, you're not expressing the ACE2 receptor. It binds, knocks it out, and that pathway can't function. So your heart pretty much stops, your blood pressure goes out of control, your kidneys stop functioning. That's what happens. And that's exactly what the mortality appears to be based on the virus binding to these receptors. So what can we do about it? Let's see if there's anything else we want to do before we get to what can we do about it. Clinical characteristics. This is basically the how are you doing? Okay, Diagnostic Bioresearch Institution in China has conducted preliminary identification of SARS-CoV-2 through the classical Cox postulates and observing morphology through electron microscopy. So far, the golden clinical diagnosis is a nucleic acid detection of the nasal and throat swab sampling or other respiratory tract samplings by real-time PCR and further confirmed by next-generation sequencing. So they're basically doing RT-PCR and watching for the growth of that particular virus in the RT system. That's fairly common. This is why, now, can you comment at all on, there was that Facebook post by the Italian doctor that has been read by Glenn Beck and several other more sensationalist media guys. That's kind of, in my opinion, looking at spreading fear, because what he's literally saying is we're going in swabbing, they're coming back positive, 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 positive. This test takes a week to do. See, I did not get a chance to look into that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Any comments on that?
Well, it takes a while to do. I don't know if I know exactly what you're talking about, but I know there are a couple of people out there. I think one of them might, because I actually was talking with a patient. He was telling me what a CDC doctor, who he claims to be a CDC doctor, said on TV. And it was all this like fear mongering type stuff. And I'm like, but that's not what the CDC officially said. The guy said, but this guy works for the CDC. It's like, but that's not what the CDC itself said.
Yeah.
So there are some people out there giving rogue opinions.
What I'm commenting on is there is a doctor in Italy where this is getting really bad. And apparently he did a big Facebook post basically saying the apocalypse is coming. And a lot of more sensational people have picked up on it and started to use this and throw this out. I am suspect of the post, but I also don't know. I have not been able to. I didn't get a chance to read it and look at it in theory. But the point I wanted to make here is that we can't possibly have a case where it's made it sound like, from the way I've heard that read, that they're swapping and testing on the spot, and we don't have that at this point.
Right. But one thing you also have to remember, Italy handled it initially completely different than what a lot of other countries did, including us. We put travel bans in effect. We started tracking people. South Korea started tracking people and collecting data. What Italy did was they shut the country down at the borders, and they didn't do any tracking inside or outside. So the people that were inside were spreading it like crazy, which is why the whole country practically is infected, because they were doing nothing to remediate the infection carriers once they got into the border. They weren't being tracked or, treated or anything. Once they got into the country, they were in, and they virtually could do whatever and infect as many people as they want. Whereas in other countries, people are tracked, they're contacted, tested, and treated. Plus, with the test kits they're picking up a lot of the minor asymptomatic cases that we just don't know about yet. So it's a combination of two things. But mainly, in my opinion, it's the shift in perspective of this doctor. Again, good intentioned as he may have been, he saw it from the perspective of a country that handled it wrong, where everybody in the whole country was getting sick because of it. Because it was rampant in that country. But he didn't have this perspective of seeing us, South Korea, and other countries.
I mean, maybe I need to dig into that a little bit more and see. I just because if there's credibility there, I want to give credence to that. But at the same time, the other factors I've heard, now I don't know what the smoking incidence is in Italy, but I know it is a much older population. And we have already established that the older population is definitely the most impacted.
Right.
Clinical symptoms. So these are the symptoms that you're going to get. 88.7% of people are going to have a fever. So that's pretty much your definitive sign. You have a crazy fever. 67% are going to get a cough, and then you're going to get really tired. Basically, the flu and the common cold all have these symptoms, right? Stop me if there's one of these that's not common cold, because I don't remember. Sputum production, 33.4%. Shortness of breath, 18%. Sore throat, 13.9%. Headache, 13.6%. In addition, part of the patients manifested gastrointestinal symptoms like diarrhea at 3.8% and vomiting at 5.0%. So that's kind of what we get. Those are all pretty much common cold and flu symptoms, right? Okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. All right. Host immune response and immunopathology. So the immune response is vital for the control and resolution of COVID infection, while it can also lead to Immunopathogenesis associated with the immune response out of control. The S proteins of coronavirus binds to the host cells of ACE2, fusing the membrane and releasing the viral RNA. The viral RNA as the pathogen-associated patterns. So PAMPs, these are what the immune system looks for, detected by the pattern recognition receptors, usually toll-like receptor. There's a series of them there. These are all things that elicit the immune response. They sense viral RNA and DNA in the endosome. The viral RNA receptor, retinoic acid inducible gene, RIG1, cytosolic receptor genes, and other items, are responsible for the recognition of the RNA and DNA in the cytoplasm. So these basically all get hijacked. Let me see if I can find where these are at. So, I mean, I think that the ultimate long-term, one of the best is, I think the herd immunity is going to be the best thing. I think we're going to get this one, and then we're going to get another one. And then I think after that, we're going to see a drop in severity. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see a drop in severity after the first season or not?
I do.
Maybe a second season about as bad, but after that, I don't think we're going to see as bad a one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we talked about antiviral treatments, current therapies, pretty much just focus on fixing the symptoms, and the respiratory support is the most important. So if you have it, particularly if you're older, respiratory support is certainly the most important. The antivirals will help slow the disease, because this type of virus, it gets in and then it just starts mass producing itself inside the cell. If you can block the reinfection with an antiviral, that is going to be a good thing. All right. But I want to focus now on the more toxicological aspect. So this article came out a number of years ago when SARS was a big thing. And let me make sure we're on the right article still. Okay, so this article is looking at the ACE2 specifically, looking at the ability to bind the receptor. This is an in vivo model, which means that they're using a wild type, which is indicated by the WT, and the ACE2KO is a knockout mouse. That means that this mouse does not contain this receptor. Now, that means its entire angiotensin system is out of whack. So it already has some issues. But then what they do is they infect it and then uninfected. And what you can see here in this figure is with the infected wild type, or the uninfected wild type, we see this basic pattern. In the infection, you can see the densifying of the cells around the lung tissue systems. The knockouts, no change in morphology. In other words, this receptor is critically important for the binding of the virus. Without this, it doesn't work. So some people said, well, let's just knock that out. Well, the problem is then you have the whole body system shutting down like we've already described. So it turns out that the more you express this protein, the more susceptible you are to an infection, but the greater your prognosis. Because as long as this ACE2 receptor is not blocked out, you will do fine. Younger people have a lot of it expressed. They can take the virus without a problem. Older people don't. So what can we do? Well, increase the expression of the ACE2. Yes, you're going to risk getting a greater infection rate, but you're going to have a better prognosis versus shutting your body down. So what are the best things? Well, vitamin D. This is looking at the renin-angiotensin system. Vitamin D alleviates lipopolysaccharide-induced acute lung injury via regulation of the renin-angiotensin system. Let me do a normal person speak. Vitamin D prevents lung injury from becoming a problem. This virus induces lung injury. Vitamin D seems to do this. How? Upregulation of the ACE2 receptor. So when they're telling you to quarantine, get out of the house for a little bit in your backyard alone. Get about 20 minutes of sunlight a day. Get the natural vitamin C in. And if you can't do that, take a vitamin C supplement. That's why I think the summer's going to happen and this thing's just going to fizzle out faster than we expect, because we're going to see more people in the sun. We're going to see a greater expression of this. What's going to happen is people will get infected. They will have a very fast remediation of symptoms. Their body immune response is going to happen, and we're going to get herd immunity by the end of the summer. That's my prediction. What do you think, Brian? That's a lot of thought, but
It's possible, and I really hope you're right because it would be one of the better alternatives. I actually agree with most of it. I think also by then we're going to have some vaccines that are going to start coming out. I know clinical trials started on one of them yesterday.
okay.
So when you look at the rollout between identification of a pathogen and clinical trials for a vaccine, this was record fast. I mean, it was a few months at most. I mean, that's pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I also think we're going to find out treatments, on how to treat it. And we mentioned, and you talked about a couple of them. And now that we know how prominent the renin-angiotensin system figures in, there's going to be a lot of researchers zooming in on that specifically and see how we can help the older people regenerate or somehow get these receptors to be more functional, help them survive. Because it's not really, from what I could tell, the virus that's directly doing the killing. It's the virus allowing other more deadly pathogens in, and in the body shutting itself down, as well as other pathogens shutting it down. All this virus is doing is acting like a catalyst, so to speak. So, but I think you're right, and it's going to basically go through its cycle, and like MERS and like SARS, I think in a couple of years we'll all be, talking about, this in past tense.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the other thing we didn't mention here, and you can speak to this, the ACE inhibitors for hypertension, I believe.
Yes, high blood pressure.
Those, to my understanding, will actually help your prognosis of this disease as well, because what happens is the virus is knocking this angiotensin system out of whack, but the ACE inhibitors will lower the ACE, so it rebalances things. You're not as good, but it does rebalance things. So that might be something to consider if all other hope might be lost, is consider looking into that as well.
It can rebody the balance of the body in a lower system so that, you get it and you're sick, but even though you're sick, you don't have as much of a chance of getting so sick that you die. So you have a greater chance of getting it, but your illness curve, so to speak, is going to be shallower.
Yeah. All right. So here's actually, I forgot this figure was in here, so I went back to this figure. So this is actually, again, looking at your in vivo mice with your wild type and your ACE2 knockouts, looking at infected versus uninfected. So their proposed mechanism here is in this yellow box. So the red box up here, SARS-CoV spike, this is when they are infecting the mouse. What happens is the infection blocks ACE2. So in toxicological terms, this line here looks like a T. This means it's blocking it. So the angiotensin 2 pathway here is what's going on. ACE2 blocks angiotensin 2. ACE1 can take over. And what happens is when ACE2 gets its hands on angiotensin 2, it produces AT2R, which will prevent lung injury, versus when ACE1 gets angiotensin 2, it produces AT1R, which induces lung injury. So why would the body produce lung injury? Well, because these two compounds have to be in balance. If you remember your basic biochemistry, or no, your basic general chemistry, equilibrium is a thing. We have to keep an equilibrium because there's times you have to shift and risk the lung injury for the other body functions. So your body's supposed to cause this constant ebb and flow of balance. What SARS-CoV does is it blocks ACE2, thus blocking the ability to prevent the lung injury, and ACE1 is mediating lung injury. That's really what's going on. So if you can inhibit ACE1 while ACE2 is blocked, you have a better chance of surviving because you're blocking the lung injury. So that's kind of what's going on based on that. There's just some other fun mouse figures, mouse cells and stuff. Bronchial versus alveoli. Spike and non-spike. So that's kind of that. I think that's pretty much all I had. Did you want to add anything else before we get into the comments here?
Well, so I think what you were saying, just to maybe clarify it in my own mind a little bit, this SARS-CoV spike that's affecting the ACE2, okay, that's knocking down the amount of the I think you scrolled it off the
Oh,
screen.
sorry. I can put it
And now
back if you want.
I'm on a 15-second delay.
Oh,
But
hold on. I'll put it back.
yeah, because I was using that to read from.
You want the mechanism back up?
Yeah.
Oop, not that one. Hold on. I gotta
Oh, not that
Okay,
that
give it
guy in
about
the.
15 seconds. It'll be back.
Okay.
Let me make it bigger.
There I am talking again.
There we go.
Because this could be important in understanding it, because
Yeah.
it shows just how important equilibrium is.
Correct.
Equilibrium is like the key to so many things in medicine, chemistry, computers, everything.
Know
Okay,
your
something's
KEQs.
back there. Okay, where is it? Down a little bit. No.
Is that the one you wanted?
Yeah,
The yellow
that's
box?
it. That's it.
Okay.
Right. So you have your SARS here, SARS-CoV-1 spike. Okay, that's knocking out your ACE2. Okay.
Correct.
ACE, in the meantime, you notice what they're doing is this ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, is actually converting angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Okay. And that's also done here with this ACE2. The SARS-CoV is blocking ACE2, but the ACE or ACE inhibiting enzyme is an angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor. If you inhibit this enzyme that's inhibiting angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, in other words, the enzyme's making more be converted. You inhibit the enzyme, you're going to make more be converted because the enzyme is inhibitory. I don't know if I said that right. The enzyme is inhibitory. So the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor, the ACE inhibitor, is inhibiting the enzyme. Okay. And that's resulting in your increase in here.
Yep. All right.
Okay. I just want to make
So
make sure that
there's
correct.
two things you can do. What you want to do is rebalance the system two ways: an ACE inhibitor, such as your hypertension drug, or you can upregulate ACE2. Vitamin D upregulates ACE2. That's its mechanism. So when you take the vitamin D, it upregulates ACE2. You're bringing balance back to the force, as it were.
Okay. Exactly. Cool.
So I had to throw a Star Wars reference in there, right? Bunch of computer nerds.
Oh yeah.
So that's really what we want to do. So those are the two things that you could do. It would be better to upregulate ACE2 rather than knock ACE1 down, because if ACE2 is down and you block ACE, you bring ACE down, it brings some balance, but your body's not running efficiently. It's kind of like spinning. Let's see, because they're a computer thing. You're spinning your cooling system without any fluid in it. How's that?
Yeah, that's a good.
But if you can add more coolant system to it, leave ACE alone, bring up ACE2, that's actually what's going to have to happen. So the best thing you can is going to be your vitamin D, because somebody asks, where can I get hypertension drugs from your doctor? I don't think that there's any of those that are over the counter.
No.
Yeah. And that brought up with the ibuprofen thing, though, the ibuprofen question at the start. So this is dealing with, I think it was over here. Got to find which one. This is the problem, is there's so much information flowing around. What my question might be is, how would some impact, such as, all right, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So like aspirin would be another one under that category, if I remember correctly. Would that have any impact in this? Now, I was trying to find the angiotensin resin pathway in the metabolic pathways list, and they are not there, indicating it's just not a standard body function. I have no idea why they're not in there. But those block, which mechanism is it? I think it's a arachidonic acid inflammation model. So my question, I guess, inflammation model. So my question is, if you were to take aspirin, so does inflammation help or hurt the prognosis of this disease? Do we know that?
Well, I know that anti-inflammatories inhibit an enzyme called cyclooxygenase, or COX.
Yes.
There's COX1 And Cox, non-specific Cox is like everything except
Yeah.
Celebrex. I think Celebrex is the only Cox 2 specific left on the market.
Yeah.
So the inflammation is all cyclooxygenase. That's the mediator of your inflammatory pathway. And then you have
Correct.
interleukins
Yeah.
and,
And so aspirin actually blocks the arachidonic acid that feeds into it. That's why
right.
aspirin works. It kind of blocks above that. What my question is does this virus, does COVID-19 have anything to do with inflammation? So if we were to increase or decrease inflammation, would that help or hurt the disease? That's a fundamental question to determine if ibuprofen or aspirin would help or hurt in this case.
Indirectly, it would help, but not because it deals with the mechanism of how the virus works at all, because that has to do with the binding of that other receptor in the lower lung. But this would help because the lung damage causes local inflammation, which makes the symptoms worse. If you take anti-inflammatories to bring the general inflammation down, the inflammation in the lung goes down, the lung function goes up a little bit, even though the damage is still there. You get some systemic symptomatic relief. When you get symptomatic relief, your body works a little better to help fight it a little better, which gives you a little bit of a fighting chance. So indirectly, I would say it helps.
Okay. Then that's kind of where I was leaning as well. So aspirin, ibuprofen could actually help the prognosis.
Right. They make you feel better,
but,
you recover better.
Yeah,
but it's not because it's doing anything to the virus, it's because it's helping your overall constitution.
Yeah. So, and I think, I mean, that's definitely more of a controversial opinion right now, but I think that's where I would go. Now, here's other factors to reduce inflammation for you guys. Cut back on carbs and cut back on processed vegetable oils. I know everyone's like, ooh, vegetable oil is so much better. No, actually, your saturated animal fats are way better for you because we have a misbalance of omega-6 versus omega-3 fatty acids to the ratio of like 19-1. That should be like, I think, 6-1 or 3-1 to 6-1. But those vegetable oils produce the massive amounts of arachidonic acid, which is why we have so much inflammation in our society because of the junk food that we're eating. Cut back on that type of stuff, your inflammation, natural body inflammation goes down because you have less arachidonic acid to feed into that whole COX pathway. So having a better diet with fewer carbs is actually going to help in the long run, I would guess. That's, I don't know, my thought. I don't know. What do you think?
And that's a much more naturalistic way of looking at it because you're bringing down the inflammatory response by lowering the mediator, by preventing the taking in of the raw material in the diet rather than inhibiting an enzyme of one of the metabolic pathways. So it would be a much more natural way to do it as well.
Yep. Ginger, I guess ginger is an anti-inflammatory as well, right?
And
what's
that's
curry?
One of those more.
I think curry is too.
Curry.
Garlic is an antiviral. It's one of the two natural antiviral medicines.
Yeah, garlic's an antiviral. Turmeric's. Turmeric's pretty good.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's have a look at some of these. Dan jumped on. Greetings. Seems to be more infectious flu, to be honest. Lethal, too old and too young. Actually, it's not really lethal young. What's the death rate among young people, like kids? I think it's very low, isn't it? Do you know of any death rates among kids, like under 10-ish, I guess?
The youngest person I know was a 56-year-old that had end-stage renal disease from brittle diabetes.
Okay.
And that's the youngest person I know.
So it's not like the flu where it's really old or really young. It's really old. Really young don't seem to be affected at all. Like really young. And a lot of this, I think, is because it's the expression of the ACE2 is so high in young people. Their body just gets it, kills it, and clears it before anything knows what's going on with it.
If you're healthy, if you're healthy and you don't have any underlying health conditions, you really don't get sick till you're about 60. And you don't really get life-threateningly sick till you're about 80.
Yeah.
So in the absence of comorbid conditions, 60s the sick rate, 80s really the age you have to worry about dying. But if you're otherwise healthy, if you're in your 50s or younger, you might be sick for a couple of weeks, but it's not really going to be, fatal or anything like
Yeah.
that. The regular flu might even be worse.
Yeah. So over here we have a representative from Germany. It says the mortality rate in Germany is 0.14%. But everyone's going crazy. They're closing everything. Yeah. A 102-year-old woman fully covered from it in India. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
They have a good diet over there. Let's see. I'm not. Is it British? I don't know. I live in Vermont. The only people here with the virus are city folk with second houses here. There you go. Avoid the cities for sure. I mean, I would take more precautions going out in public, but I wouldn't. But I'm not like, oh, I'm gonna stay inside. Oh, I fear my life. No, not at all. Statistically speaking, 0.4% of people are under 50. All right. But the craziness is getting crazy. Yeah, there was actually an excellent video by David Stewart about this. How you get caught up in the rush, not because you're concerned yourself, but because if you don't actually take some steps, you're going to run out of supplies because everyone else is hoarding them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
it's like what happened with me with the masks. I went to order masks. There weren't any.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just wondering if I should wear my FFP3 mask when going to the basement in the shopping mall grocery store. So what do you think? Wearing a mask out in public? Yes, no?
Mm-hmm. If you're in a high risk area, I could see it. But under normal conditions, if you're outside, I don't see it because the wind, it blows. Yeah. And if you don't get too close to people, it would disperse. But if you're inside and you're close to people, if you're in a high risk area, it might not hurt.
Yeah, no, there you go. There you go.
If you wear it right, yeah. If you wear it right, wear the right type.
Yes.
Yes. Don't have your nose sticking out.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those. I saw a couple today that, their chin is well protected, but their mouth and nose is open. Yeah. I saw a group of them today. So Carbon Programmers city is in lockdown, and FB, same at FB's city. Let's see. There were talks of 2,000 U.S. flu deaths in 2019. There were positive tests of COVID-19 symptoms of those deaths, but the U.S. doctors did not raise the alarm. I have a friend who his brother actually traveled to New York City right before it was on lockdown, went to a big concert, came back, tightness of chest, difficulty breathing, all this fun stuff, went to the hospital and they wouldn't even give him a test for it. So. Oh, Lord. See, virus suspected to be brought to Wuhan during the military games, which U.S. soldiers attended. Yeah. All right. Say clean the elevator buttons, but honestly, you never know who's going to show up. Yeah, like everyone's like, use your, don't use cash, use your payment pins so we can all touch the same buttons. I'll trust the cash before I'll trust that. No one's using cash except us crazy people who isolate ourselves anyway. The money's fine, people. You be concerned about touching all those screens to enter your PIN numbers. That's what I'd be concerned about. All right. Let's see. Objectionably, this is really bad pandemic. Nothing really will exaggerate its multitude. There are a lot of inaccuracies, though. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people are going to get it, but a lot of people aren't even going to know they're going to get it. That's, I think, the biggest thing.
And then a lot of people have had it and don't even know they've had it.
Okay, MedCam, Dr. Roger Seholt. Do you know anything about him?
Mm-mm.
Okay, he says pulmonologist and critical care specialist. He says chloroquine is the key to saturate the cells with zinc, halting the replication. All right. Okay, now that the Chinese... What's your thoughts on chloroquine? Is that going to help?
It'll help. But that's a general type antiviral that'll help with pretty much any type of virus. It's not specific, but it'll do.
Now, would that also, though, if it's just dumping into cells and blocking replication, would that not also impact the just the host's basic cellular function as well, though?
No, because there's more to it than that. He
Okay.
simplified the language a lot.
Okay. I'll have to look up that class of drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that class of drugs. All right. Let's see. Read for sources, both Western and inland. But what interests me is the first case in Iran was an elderly couple who had no contact with Chinese people. All right. All I can say is we see a month, hopefully, and others wrong. Yep. Zinc lozenges or garlic. Come on. There you go.
Mm. Yeah,
um,
garlic.
Yum. Maybe I'll go have some garlic. Actually, I was going to have my breakfast sandwiches with my unknown bread. I was
Mm.
able to find my English muffins. They had some at Walmart. Um, I'm so happy about that. I mean, I have everything else to make breakfast sandwiches. I didn't have English muffins. I go to the store. They had exactly one package of English muffins. They were cinnamon raisin. I'm like, no, I'm not having a breakfast sandwiches with cinnamon raisin stuff. So there's one thing on the shelf that looks comparable. Put it down. I'm like, I'm going to see because eggs are in short supply in our city now. Like you can't find eggs now. So I
Mm.
go over just to look in the egg section and there's 3 packs. Nobody realized it, but there's one brand of English muffins that is supposed to be stored in the cooler for some reason. They had 3 packs left. I snagged me one of them. Yes. I have 2 packs. I'm hoarding English muffins right now, people. I have 2 packs.
Wow.
Are you hoarding anything?
Mm. I don't know if you consider it hoarding, but I got 8 boxes of gloves, 100 each. That's 800 gloves.
Yeah. And you're a doctor,
Um,
though, so you're going to use gloves more than most people.
yeah, I use them though. That's why I'm not sure if it's hoarding or not.
Yeah.
No, I mean, because I wasn't that worried about it. And by the time I found out all the stuff was in short supply, it was already all gone. So by
Yeah.
the time I went there to go to buy it to hoard it, other people were already hoarding it.
Yeah.
So they're hoarding it before me. So I lose out.
So it's
Oh,
sad it's
well.
blown up this way, but I have Western people telling me that they won't get it because it's an Asian thing. I don't think that's the case. Somebody actually had a comment here, a question here. Is ACE2 upregulated in the Asian population? Do you know anything about that? I do not.
Mm, I do not think so. I'm not
Okay.
sure, but I don't know.
All those vitamins. I take all those vitamins extra for my diabetes and COPD and asthma, which is good. I take all these pills. Yeah, yeah. So that's good. One of the things like asthma does not seem to have any interplay with it, but diabetes does. So if you get it with diabetes, you are at higher risk. But keep taking those vitamins, I guess. Um, Okay, clinical studies are in the MedCram videos. Okay. To agonist. Okay, so Kleiman is it Kleiman leading? I don't know the medical terms for these things. Like I'd know it in the in the toxicology research, but there's a couple antagonists or valestrerin angiotensin 2 receptor blocker. I guess they're asking about those. All right. Ginger helps reduce the damage. That could, if it's since it's anti-inflammable. Omperazole. What's that one? Omperazole.
Parazole.
Omperazole.
That's a stomach antacid.
Huh.
That's a proton pump inhibitor. If it's the
I
one I'm
don't.
thinking.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't know. He says it's over the counter, but I don't know.
Yeah, it
Ibuprofen.
is.
Okay.
It's over the counter. It used to not be. It's Nexium is the brand name.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here is another one from the MedCram. Ibuprofen increases binding for COVID-19. Explained in MedCram videos, increases your chance of infections. Okay, here is this tricky part. You do not need to be worried about increasing your chance of infection. You need to increase your chance of positive prognosis. Okay, so anything that's going to increase the chance, it means it's upregulating or making your ACE2 more efficient. That's what you want because that's what causes your body to assimilate it, get the immune response, and clear it faster. So I would say, and with the other mechanisms, I would say ibuprofen's good. It's the same thing. Vitamin D will increase your chance of infection. Yes, it will, because it will upregulate the binding protein. But that's exactly what you want, because if the binding protein is not upregulated, you're going to have a misbalance of the system, and that's going to be what causes the problem. Let's see. Will eating fruits do anything? Not that I know of. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think so.
I would probably not OD on the bananas and the grapes because they do not have enough fiber in them to counteract the sugar. But other than that, I think fruits will be inconsequential. However, you will get some good vitamins out of them. So, LA has shut down all unnecessary services and shops. However, Glendale is still open. I'll just drive to Glendale. Any natural antivirals? I know of off the top, garlic. I believe isn't marijuana antiviral, but of course don't smoke it because that's going to mess with your lungs. And there is a third, Iceland moss, from the herbology standpoint. I believe those are the only 3 antivirals that are natural that I know of off the top. And I don't know anything else about Iceland moss, just that it showed up in a list of antivirals I was reading once. Let's see. Good ways to reduce the damage of the virus. Yeah, brothers recommended stay home for a week before it closed. He worried the one kid was all it would take to infect the school. I think so. Do you think one kid could infect the school if the precautions were not in place?
He could infect quite a few students, depending how popular he was and his behavior. I mean, if he went around sneezing and coughing.
Yeah. Hope he was a computer nerd.
Yeah.
Let's see. Costco in Glendale is rationing food, restricting purchase of eggs to 1 box per customer. Seattle, anyone with a BMI over 25 will not get a certain treatment. Uh-oh. Don't be fat.
Oh, government-controlled medicine.
Okay. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Western or European?
Yeah, Western or European.
I don't know. Ah! All right. Heard of andriachrome. Heard a lot of crazy people talking about andriachrome. Adrenochrome? I don't know. Do you heard of that one? I've not heard of that one.
Adrenochrome.
No.
I can't make out what it's supposed to be.
Clearly, it makes your Chrome browser run faster.
Yeah. It's adrenaline for your Chrome browser.
That's right. Well, we've hit the bottom of comments. So any final words here before we wrap it up?
Well, just again, revisiting the common sense, and I'm sure a lot of the doctors and newscasters you see on TV are all saying the same thing, but it's all basic hygiene, basic etiquette, basic common sense, basic caring about, how you affect other people, washing your hands, covering your coughs. I mean, right now, the only weapons we have at our disposal are pretty simple weapons, but if used properly, they're pretty powerful weapons.
Absolutely. If you're going to be eating out, I would definitely bring with you some sanitized wipes of some form and wipe off the tabletops, because if it's like a low traffic area, you're okay. But if someone's sitting there coughing, eating, whatever else, and then they're just kind of touching the counters and they get up and leave and you come down and sit in that spot 20 minutes later and you touch the tables and then are eating, you are going to get infected from that, most likely.
Yeah. They have the Clorox.
Yeah. And so sanitize your eating spaces if you are eating out in public. I do actually support some of the measures, a lot of things as much as I didn't like the one statement de Blasio said, at the other hand, he's saying, hey, pack up food for takeout. And that's good. In fact, I went to Moe's last week because last week was going to be the last time I eat out in a restaurant for a few weeks because, I'm taking some slight precautions myself. And so I go to Moe's, right? Kind of like a Qdoba's Chipotle type store. Well, they were actually taking a lot of neat precautions, which was really fascinating. So they actually had already taken cups and put lids on them and had a big bin of those. So they would hand you a cup with a lid already on it. So presumably, hopefully, they were doing it with a face mask of something to take extra precautions. They'd go in, they'd put lids on all the cups, put them in a giant bin, and just hand you a cup with a lid already on it, so they didn't have to risk anything else. They also have salsas there. All the salsas were already put into the individual containers. A little bit more wasteful in the plastic, but it probably did a lot to greatly decrease any possible spread of disease at that point in time. So, I liked what they did. I didn't go out. I don't eat out much, so I can't speak what other places are doing. My friend who's working in food industry, just running the cash register, he's wearing gloves now just for that, which is probably a good enough thing. So those are kind of the basic things. Just be wise and sensible. Wash your hands a little bit more often. Touch your face a little bit less. Clean surfaces if you're going to eat out in public, a place that could have a lot. So I think that's the best thing we can do.
Mm-hmm. And don't panic. Don't panic.
Don't panic, people.
Panicking never did a thing for anybody other than get them in trouble and mess them up.
Mm-hmm.
Panic is not worth it.
Yep. So Alex Jones talks about adrenochrome, apparently.
Well,
no idea.
No idea either.
All right. Maybe it's one of his own special products or something. I don't know. He has a lot. Previous leader of Italy was lamenting the increase of TB by washed migrants could increase the spread of latent TB in the population. Could explain the difference of mortality in Italy. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you have an underlying latent tuberculosis and you get this, you're probably a goner.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and that is an infectious disease that will spread from person to person. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I think I will actually release, if you guys missed it on Saturday, I did a dramatic reading of the CDC's Zombie Apocalypse graphic novel. I think I will try and remember to schedule that for release tomorrow morning, and then we will be back to Linux content tomorrow afternoon. We will be doing another Distro Wars. I don't know what yet, so I have a list of things in my little black book, and so I will pick 2 distros to pit against each other. So stay tuned for that tomorrow, and then we'll jump on into our supporter news, or our supporters, and then our news and some more Linuxy stuff on Saturday. So final words, Brian, what do you think? Thanks for coming on, by the way.
Okay, you're very welcome. Glad to be on. And anytime I get to mix medicine and Linux, I'm a happy camper.
Why not? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely less Linuxy, definitely more geeky, but I had a good time. I hope you did too. And we will catch you guys later.